is gonna be one of those episodes, isn't it? We open this week with the Sakura sisters, as usual, working at their parents' cafe. However, things would quickly shake up and eventually spiral into total madness once Hamori stumbled upon one of their old food menus and noticed something scratched out at the very end of it. Mr. Sakura was about to tell his daughters what it was, but was quickly cut off by the missus, who failed to realize the can of worms she had opened. Because, as a result, the Precure tried to figure out what it was, with only Kokoro coming up with a sensible answer. Nana, you need to stop trying to be a meme character in order to actually become one. Actually, ironically enough, this would be the closest to the correct answer, so yeah, it's gonna be really stupid. Regardless, Hamori just decided to turn into a little detective because she saw one on TV. Well, at least she didn't become a butt detective. And no, I'm not making that up. That's actually a thing made by Toei, and even sharing a lot of the staff from this very franchise. Ugh. Thankfully, we were spared having to see a literal asshole chasing down, well, that, and instead we got some more refined writing with 3 teenage idols stalking a little girl. Yeah, okay, it's probably worth mentioning that the director and writer pairing for this episode was Yutaka Tsuchida and Masahiro Yokotani of Tropical Rouge fame, so yeah, just wanted to throw that out there. Anyway, Hamori's first lead got her to theorize that maybe the secret menu item was oden and hamburger steak, which, considering that the former is a hot pot dish, throwing a hamburger in just sounds disgusting. Still, Emma, for whatever reason, tried to help Hamori's investigation, all the while the Precure with all of their stealth skills covertly observed.
Hey pal, you just blowing from Stupid Town?
Yeah, you kinda see my big problem with this episode. Because, for me at least, I think comedy needs to have some proper context behind it. Like, in Tropical Rouge, I think that most of the comedy did work because they established that it was a mostly comedy series, with Manatsu in particular not being the sharpest tool in the shed. And the thing is, this isn't Tropical Rouge, and while Uta can be klutzy and narrow-minded, she's not usually outright stupid. Thus, the comedy here does feel kind of forced, and therefore not as funny as the characters are acting more like ones from Tropical Rouge wearing their skin. Now, this is far from the worst comedy I've ever seen, and I'll say right now, I don't even think this is that bad of an episode. It's just a little disjointed, to say the least. Anyway, Emma was at least able to point to a seemingly better lead than her, which of course turned out to be the old man Mobius. I think the bigger mystery here is what happened to your voice? Yeah, weirdly enough, this old man's voice actor was suddenly replaced. Said voice actor was Tomomichi Nishimura, who, as we just said, played Mobius from Fresh, as well as Basil from the OG series. I'm guessing he was replaced because his VA is really getting up there in age, so yeah, fair enough. That said, I think they could have gotten a much better replacement because this guy does not sound like an old man. It'd be like if I were to try and replace him as an old geezer voice. Hey, I'm still not 40 yet. Anyway, the not-so-old man Joe turned out to be of not so much help, as he was the type who always just ordered the usual and never actually looked at the menu. However, he then went on to claim that he totes used to be a real gumshoe back in his heyday, so he could help with Hamori's investigation, and just not reenact whatever he saw in Detective Conan. Nurse, I think you need to up this old man's medication. Meanwhile, at the Bar of Evil, Chokine was only now thinking about hiring a detective to track down her runaway underlings that she played a really big hand in chasing away. Also, I swear, I think Jogi's VA was actually trying to sound more like Kappe Yamaguchi, aka the VA behind Shinichi Kudo here. わからないというのはもっと僕のことを知りたいという意味です。俺の名は工藤新一。 Anyway, Best Boy Tanaka joined in on this investigation, which of course led to them finding the most important witness in this mystery. I mean, you could probably ask this guy to help cure cancer and he'll have it done by tomorrow. Anyway, the witness was a guy named Hiroshi Owarai, and as his very punny and hard to pronounce surname suggested, he was a comedian and had been the second most frequent patron to the Cafe Glitter after Joe. Thus, they tried to visit him at his apartment, but quickly learned from the landlady that he had left to try and become a professional comedian. He had claimed that he would only return if he had accomplished his dream, but after over a decade, it was pretty clear that it didn't work out, and he wouldn't just return now all of a sudden. Well, I didn't need those cell phones way any. Still, the Precure had kind of rightfully given up on this wild goose chase, and even seemed to suggest that Hamori to not bother making whatever this old man with dementia was trying to recreate. I mean, sure, the comedian had come back to town, but it's not as though our characters were just gonna run into him out of nowhere and...
Well, that's just lazy writing.
Also, for whatever reason, they really tried to hammer in that this guy was a dog person, because... I don't know, maybe Okotani watched a compilation of the dogs across the JoJo franchise and felt a little bad for them. Anyway, the comedian knew exactly what the secret menu item was, as it held a particularly important place in his heart. So much so that he didn't bother to tell these girls, who had been investigated all day, what it was, and instead rushed to the cafe to thank Mr. Sakura. However, to his overly dramatic disappointment, they were closed, likely to prepare for the dinner chef, and this of course left him open to becoming a victim of the week. That would have been the cool development, but no, instead he just became a Heisen. I mean, granted, as we've seen in stuff like Smash Bros. And Kaguya-sama, the giant fan can actually be a deadly weapon. And with Tsuchida directing this one, we actually did get one of the better fights this week, even if it didn't portray our heroines in the best of lights. You know what, Yamcha? I think we've had you wrong this whole time. I mean, at the very least you're not as bad as these numbnuts. But yeah, for me, this is easily the funniest part of the episode, with even some really decent action. I think my favorite bit was them outright parodying the show's overusage of platitudes to win the day. My only minor complaint was the usual overusage of stock attack animations, but at least they tried to make it as snappy as possible here as they went into their finisher. Hey, if y'all aren't gonna take things seriously, then I'm not gonna use one of my serious explosions. Anyway, they saved the comedian, and then thanks to the Sakura sisters, he was finally able to thank their father for being an inspiration to him, as the secret menu item was a one-liner gag. Oh, come on! You just stole that from Goku! But yeah, he thanked Mr. Sakura for his literal dad jokes, and even wanted to hear another one. However, I guess they tried to end this episode on a sweet note by saying that he had given up on his gags to allow the spotlight to be more on Uta, but no, after all of this nonsense, I'm not gonna let y'all end on a happy note.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
This episode was dumb. Entertainingly dumb, but still dumb nonetheless. I mean, don't get me wrong, I genuinely was laughing at times, but almost equally, I was rolling my eyes at the outright lazy writing. I do think I was more entertained in the long run, but not enough for me to say that this is a great outing. One thing I will give genuine praise to for this episode was the fact that it was actually a little more focused than previous ones. Yeah, I know that sounds weird after I talked about how random the comedy was here, but in terms of just the plot, it actually did follow a mostly straight through line and didn't suddenly become like an episode about supporting a depressed teacher or forcing a ship between Uta and Kaito, which, yeah, I don't think a lot of people are looking forward to next week, are they? But yeah, in that sense, I do have to praise the plot for doing exactly what it was and never really deviating. Now, of course, execution was another matter altogether. Like, even discounting the goofier nature of this episode, the way in which the Precure just so happened to encounter the comedian was incredibly forced and just felt like a cheap shortcut to resolve the plot. Meanwhile, the comedy here was a little hit and miss for me, if only because a lot of it was predicated on the characters being written more like Tropical Rouge characters. Uta is not Manatsu, so she shouldn't act this stupid. That said, unlike last week with its over-reliance on fat jokes of all things, there was actually good comedy here and even a really good fight. Thus overall, this was an entertaining enough episode, just as long as you put aside some of those dad jokes. Starting next week, we are going to be moving these reviews to be released on Monday, as there is going to be a new kid, or rather 40-year-old man on the block. Yep, Tojima Wants to Be a Kamen Rider is starting next week, and since it does air before Precure on Saturdays, we'll make a review for it first, if only to make the editing process a little easier on my sleep schedule. Look forward to it. Until next time though, farewell for now my friends, and sesame seeds. It makes about as much sense of this episode.